Hello, and welcome to another look with Christian King. Today I'm here to give you a little bit of a sales pitch about why you should be an MMA fan, or at least a UFC fan. Not everyone's going to have the time to be a hardcore fan and watch every fight, but I believe that if you're a fan of sports and if you're a fan of competition at the highest level, you should at least be watching the highest level of MMA, which is the UFC, and particularly the top 10 fighters from each weight class. So I'm going to run down why you should be an MMA fan. The first reason I would give would be the sporting aspect of the sport. At the end of the day, that's what it is. It's a sport. It is more entertainment than some other sports, but it is a raw competition. It is not a show. It's not scripted. It's a real sport at the end of the day. And one thing that I think makes this sport so much more exciting than other sports is that you can have a 25-minute title fight of two fighters at the highest level that ends in 13 seconds. A lot of people who are sports fans probably saw Conor McGregor's knockout of Jose Aldo a couple years ago on SportsCenter. That fight was supposed to be 25 minutes, if you didn't know, and it lasted 13 seconds, and those are two of the best fighters in the world. You just don't get that in other sports. Even other combat sports, boxing, you don't see very many first-round knockouts at the highest level. And, I'd be willing to bet all my money that the next high-level boxing fight that takes place won't end in the first round. So MMA will just always keep you on your toes and keep you guessing. The second reason I would give to be a MMA fan is the characters of the sport. They're people from all walks of life, all different stories. They are some of the most humble people you'll ever meet and some of the most brash and arrogant people you ever meet. And the way they all mix together and interact with each other will always keep you entertained. Third reason I would give would be the storylines. This is closely related to the characters, but MMA is full of storylines. I liken it to a soap opera for men. There's always some drama going on, and there's always stories. There's always guys that used to train together, and now one of them moved on from the gym, and now they're fighting each other, and they used to train together every day. And you have Conor McGregor, the most famous MMA fighter. He's always at odds with his employer, the UFC, and he doesn't want to be an employee. He wants to be a partner, but then he goes and gets into trouble. So, he has a court date coming up, and now when he goes back, he doesn't have any leverage anymore, so he has to fight for that leverage, and just always storylines to keep you fascinated with this sport. Another storyline going on right now, you have kid Colby Covington who just won the interim welterweight title, and he's out there running some pro wrestling style gimmick where he's just insulting everyone and making everyone mad and giving out movie spoilers on Twitter, and there's always something funny and entertaining to keep track of in this sport, and that's part of the fun of it. The fourth reason I would give would be the nationality and the countries of all these different fighters. There are fighters from almost every country competing at the highest level, and if you go down to a slightly lower level of still professional fighting, you can find someone from literally every country. But even within the UFC, there's fighters from all different countries all over the world, and representing all different nations. And other than soccer, you aren't going to find another sport where you have so many different countries represented at the highest level. So I think, especially if you're a soccer fan, you'll quickly find the common ground between soccer and MMA when you see just how far it reaches across the world. And the fifth reason I would give, and then we'll leave it at this, is that anyone can fight. And I don't mean by that anyone can get off the street and go be a professional fighter, but what I mean is that any body type, any gender, any race, any nationality, everyone can do it. You can't play lacrosse if you're a poor kid from the inner city, but you can wrestle. You can wrestle at your local school, and then you can end up becoming an MMA fighter. You have people of all different shapes and sizes in the sport, and for me, that's a ton of fun. When I watch the NBA or the NFL, I don't see guys that are my size. I don't see guys that are 5'9" and about 160 pounds. You don't see that in the NFL or the NBA. And if you're a woman who loves sports, you don't see women competing at the highest level in other sports. They might have their own league like the WNBA, but we can't even begin to compare the popularity of the WNBA to the NBA, but you can compare the popularity of women's MMA to men's MMA because they fight side by side on the same events. And sometimes the women are headlining and sometimes the men are headlining, and they're all paid equally. And a lot of the women make more than a lot of the men, just like some of the men make more than some of the women, but they're all paid equally from the start. The starting pay for a first fight in the UFC is the same for men and women, and you can't say that about other sports. And so I think that MMA gives everybody a chance to see themselves represented, whether that means their gender or their country or their race or their size or the shape of their body. You can find people of all different sizes and shapes and countries and races and genders. You can find them all in MMA, and to me, that's a lot of fun. Everyone's represented. So if you haven't been following any MMA, but you love sports and you love competition, I encourage you to tune in. I'll tell you how you can get started. Go to the UFC's website, and they have a thing called UFC Fight Pass, which is essentially Netflix for MMA, and they have all the fights in there, all the best fights of throughout the years, and all the obscure odd fights and all the big ones that people were talking about. And what you can do is you can do a free trial there. You can cancel it right away, so you don't have to worry about remembering, and you'll still have it for, I think it's a 2-week trial maybe. It's at least a week. Go on there and check out some fights. I'd recommend looking back at, I believe it was UFC 179, but the fight was Jose Aldo versus Chad Mendes 2. That's a great fight to check out. That fight has a little bit of everything in it. It was a back and forth action-packed fight in Brazil with a crazy crowd and a great duo of announcers. I believe it was Mike Goldberg and Brian Stan. So go check that fight out if you want a first fight to check out. But go on there and start watching some fights, and I think before you know it, you'll find yourself a fan.